touching. Quit touching.
Ooh.
You don't even know what you took. You just typing stuff? Yeah, I see that, but you wrote all this for nothing. Okay, you need to take this downstairs, brush your teeth. It's time for bed. Yeah. Why? Why? You have your own room.
No running shoes, bro. How y'all doing, chat? Oh shit, I fucked up. Already fucked up, chat.
Words are a little fast, that's
Alright, let's hurry up. Yo, mama. What's your problem? See how long this is gonna take. No, that has to be guaranteed, right? And it's special attack on. It's always shiny.
I'm ready.
Where are my quick rolls?
What, the sweaty?
Wait, here. Look at me shiny this.
You knew my ass was coming because you should already be in bed. Go on. That was just funny as fuck. I was like had a person in front of me, and I was just shooting people, and they were shooting the body. What are we playing?
Bro, how many resets is this gonna take? Is the question. That is the question pending. Got the first one easy. This one, not so easy.
Yeah. They're just in the building above me. Right. So you didn't have to recount here. Who's with me? The green? Whoa. Close here. God damn, we all saw that? Watch second floor. Watch tower. Tower. Bro, my game sense is just different, bro.
Tis different. Bro.
Yeah, he's gonna jump down. He's gonna jump down and come out the front door. Watch. Bro. Look right here. Yeah, I broke him. Broke again. Damn, that dude's gone through 6 plates. There's no way he just has plates like that, bro. Broke. Broke again. Bro, what the hell? I love the HDR, dude. Damn, good shots. Okay, we're worried about like the fucking 2 teams that are coming up behind us. Nobody in tower. Yeah, I've seen that, bro. Yeah. Watch right side. I was gonna say they're definitely dead. Took ammo. Oh shit. Something. Oh shit. Nope, you ain't get me like that, pussy. Right side of us. There's somebody looking at us. Right. To our right. Cover you to the end, dude. I would definitely be careful. I'm sure there's probably people close to this building. Probably right side. Oh, for sure. Probably closer than that. Probably somebody laying down somewhere, dude. You guys are crazy, dude. You guys are fucking nuts. There's fighting over here. And to our left. I'm not doing shit, bro. Where should we go, guys? Up the hill? Should we turn? I think there's somebody. No, I think there's people in this building. Cluster strike.
Yes. Let's play. Am I actually alive? Have I done things correctly? Pokemon period. Part of the reason for this is that the steel type still resisted Ghost and Dark, so Metagross was only weak to fire and ground type moves. Overall, the Pokemon were a lot slower back then because this was before we had pretty ridiculous power creep, and so Metagross actually ended up at a pretty nice speed tier where you could use it in both Tailwind and Trick Room without needing to invest that many points in its speed. It has a very useful ability called Clear Body that prevents the opponent from lowering its stats, which is a big deal as Intimidate is often used to slow down physical attackers. Metagross had both good bulk and a high attack stat for the time, and combining that with its great defensive and decent offensive typing made it difficult to remove while still allowing it to do damage every single turn. There was a couple different ways of using Metagross. One of the more popular ones is a strategy that has been kind of lost to time. You would give Metagross a Lumberry, which cures all status conditions, and then you would use Swagger on it, like your own Pokemon would use Swagger, which doubles the target's attack stat and confuses them, but the Lumberry would remove the confusion. Since you couldn't lower Metagross's attack after this point, and because the Swagger user was normally Cresselia, who could control the speed of the battle, this was very dangerous. It wasn't the only way that players used Metagross though. Some players used Choice Band, often even using Explosion, and Choice Band Explosion could often just delete entire teams, and there were some other strategies that popped up as well. Going into X and Y, Metagross was nerfed. The biggest thing was the fact that Steel would no longer resist Dark and Ghost, but also Meteor Mash was nerfed as well, and so players tended to have a much harder time using regular Metagross, though it did pop up every once in a while. Now in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Mega Metagross was introduced, introduced, and this was definitely a good Mega Evolution. It changed the way that Metagross played pretty dramatically. Instead of being this kind of bulky, tanky Pokemon that worked both in Trick Room or outside of Trick Room, it turned Metagross into a fast and powerful attacker that was really good into fairy types in particular. Now, it was never the strongest Mega Evolution, but it was always a very good one. I would put it in the A or the B tier at pretty much all points. Mega Metagross got the Tough Claws ability, which boosted some of its moves even further, and it could still take advantage of Clear Body because switches happened before Mega Evolution did, so your opponent couldn't switch in an Intimidate user until after you Mega Evolved, giving Mega Metagross an edge. Mega Metagross was not considered a better Mega Evolution, in large part just because the other Mega Evolutions were kind of broken, like Mega Kangaskhan, Mega Salamence, Mega Charizard, Mega Gengar. All these Pokemon had some kind of game-breaking advantage, whereas Mega Metagross was just a really good regular Pokemon, but both Metagross forms had their moments and performed really well at times. The only reason that Metagross isn't higher on this list is because I think the Pokemon above it are all more dominant, but it is still undoubtedly one of the best Psychic-type Pokemon of all time. Coming in at number 5 is Tapu Lele, a Pokemon introduced as one of the 4 Tapu Pokemon in Sun and Moon. Now, Tapu Lele's never won the World Championships, but it did place second at Worlds twice. It also has 6 national level event wins, and all of this is considering that it's not even in Scarlet and Violet. Like I said, Tapu Lele is one of the 4 Tapu Pokemon, and is the one with the most focus on offense. Just like Gardevoir, Fairy is a good secondary type because it gives it access to some very powerful move, and Fairy in general is kind of just like a better type than Psychic, or a better version of the Psychic type, so it's certainly not bad. Tapu Lele could be used in a couple different ways. Back in Sun and Moon, it had access to Z moves, and Z Psychic was kind of the equivalent of that generation's Dragon Gem Draco Meteor, although it did have worse offensive typing. The thing is that if you didn't resist Z Psychic from Tapu Lele, it would KO pretty much anything that it hit. Another way of getting more damage in your Tapu Lele was to use the Choice Specs, which allowed Tapu Lele to have multiple huge attacks, though none of them quite as powerful as Z Psychic. The advantage of using Choice Specs is that it allowed you to train your Tapu Lele with much more of a focus and bulk, because your item was providing so much power. Other items saw play as well. Life Orb was a decently popular one, and Choice Scarf had a funny interaction with Xerneas where you could run Choice Scarf Tapu Lele, and you could use the move Magic Room, which temporarily turns off all items for 5 turns, so you would use Tapu Lele, send it out, it would outspeed Xerneas, you would Magic Room to turn off the Xerneas' Power Herb, it would go for Geomancy, which normally uses the Power Herb to turn a 2-turn move into a 1-turn move, but because you turned off the items, they no longer would be able to do that, and then Tapu Lele could switch moves because Magic Room had also turned off its own Choice Scarf. If that didn't make any sense, don't worry about it. It's just a funny interaction that I think is cool. Oh yeah, just like in DD, Tapu Lele also has access to the Psychic Surge ability, setting up the Psychic Terrain. Actually, Tapu Lele was the original Pokemon with this ability, so there was a time where it was the only way to get Psychic Terrain on your team. Thankfully, Tapu Lele does not get access to Expanding Force. That would have been a problem. The difference between these two Pokemon, though, is that whereas in DD Female is much more of a supportive Psychic Terrain setter, Tapu Lele is much more of an offensive one, but unlike in DD Male, who's so frail, Tapu Lele actually has decent bulk, and so it often will stick around for at least 1 attack. And DD Female often enables a stronger, more offensive partner, and Tapu Lele can do this as well, but the thing is, Tapu Lele does this while also threatening offense of its own. When it was legal, Tapu Lele was often paired with Ultra Necrozma, who could do immense amounts of damage with its signature Z move, which I don't know if we're allowed to show, it might copyright claim the video, but regardless, these two were a really scary offensive pairing. Tapu Lele also enabled some more niche Pokemon that otherwise wouldn't see play, most specifically Pokemon with the Unburden ability, which doubles their speed stats whenever they use their held item. Pokemon like Drifblim and Excelgor really enjoyed being paired with Tapu Lele because they both have the Unburden ability, and they could use the Psychic Seed item, which activates when Psychic Terrain is active to give them a special defense boost, which would in turn activate Unburden, doubling their speed stats. Both these Pokemon won tournaments when paired with Tapu Lele, and they otherwise likely wouldn't have seen much play. This is kind of the reverse of Indeedee, where Indeedee is a defensive Pokemon that enables an offensive attacker, and Tapu Lele is an offensive Pokemon that enables a defensive support Pokemon. Anyway, Tapu Lele is certainly one of the best Psychic type Pokemon of all time, and I'm sure it will continue to put up results if it ever is added back to future games. Coming in at number 4 is a Pokemon that people I think are going to be surprised by, but I looked through all the numbers, I looked through all the results, and it's absolutely fair. The number 4 slot in our list is Gothitelle. People might think I'm biased because Gothitelle is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon, but hear me out. Gothitelle has won the World Championships twice, one of which was before it had access to its most broken tool. Gothitell's used mostly because it has access to one of the best abilities in the game, Shadow Tag. Shadow Tag prevents the opponent from switching out for as long as the user is on the field, and it doesn't work on ghost type Pokemon. Trapping the opponent on the field means you don't have to worry about another Pokemon switching in. It simplifies the game dramatically by stripping away your opponent's options. You can use Shadow Tag both offensively to trap something in that your partner Pokemon can KO, or defensively to trap a Pokemon in that has its stats lowered or is otherwise bad at doing damage. Gothitelle has a number of good supporting moves like Trick Room, Heal Pulse, Charm, and Tickle. Tickle might sound a little funny because it's, it seems just like a joke move, but back in X and Y, it was actually one of the main things that Gothitelle did. Being able to lower the opponent's attack stat was good, but being able to lower their defense stat to combo with Mega Mawile, who also lowered their attack stat with the Intimidate ability before it Mega evolved, was a really dangerous duo. Gothitelle was already a great Pokemon, but in Sword and Shield, it received a buff that didn't end up mattering actually until Scarlet and Violet. It got access to the move Fake Out, which is one of the most powerful moves in the entire game. It wasn't as good during Sword and Shield because Dynamax Pokemon couldn't flinch, and Fake Out, you only really use it because you want to flinch the opponent. That being said, in Scarlet and Violet, Dynamax was removed, and so Gothitelle saw a major resurgence. Its usage was never so high, but the results that it was picking up was insane. Gothitelle had one of the best runs of any Pokemon without super high usage during Scarlet and Violet, and actually most recently, I just won another regional championship with it, which I believe is my third one ever, in a format where I was the only person to even top cut with Gothitelle. It's a Pokemon that can always pop up regardless of the power level of the format because of how good Shadow Tag is on a bulky Pokemon. And I'm sure that as long as it's in future games, we will continue to see it going forward. Okay, before we talk about the top three, let's do some quick honorable mentions. First, Exeggutor. Exeggutor is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon, and I want to mention it here because I got second with it at the World Championships in 2012 during the second year of Black and White. We also saw Exeggutor pop up a little bit in the most recent format as an attacker actually that could both set Trick Room and take advantage of the sun with its chlorophyll ability, actually using Expanding Force on a Trick Room Psychic Terrain based team. Next, Farigiraf. I really wanted to put Farigiraf on this list, but I just couldn't given how good the Pokemon on here are and how many results that they have, but it was a Pokemon that I really wanted to include. It's really good, and I think if I made this video by the time Scarlet and Violet is over, it would have earned its spot. But as things stand right now, not yet. Hatterene. It felt kind of bad to leave Hatterene off this list because, like, yeah, it's kind of one of the quintessential Expanding Force Pokemon. It's the Pokemon that I think of when I think of Expanding Force, but it just doesn't have as good results as any of the Pokemon on this list. Most of the Pokemon here either have a really high level of dominance or a really good finish at the World Championships. Hatterene has neither, so I had to leave it off. But yeah, it's another Psychic Fairy type Pokemon that is a very good Trick Room attacker that I think is one of the best Psychic types of all time, just like not one of the top 10 ones. And then in terms of power, the strongest Pokemon that I left off was Necrozma, specifically Ultra Necrozma. This Pokemon was only ever legal for 1 year, but it did get second at the World Championships during that year. Light That Burns My Eyes is just a really powerful signature Z move, and it's definitely a really good Pokemon, and Psychic Dragon is really cool typing. However, because it was only legal one time and it was never like the most dominant Pokemon in the format, I didn't think that I could put it here. Oh, and some of you were probably wondering about Mewtwo, but I've mentioned this before, I guess I'll just say it again. In competitive play in the official competitive format, Mewtwo just can't really keep up. It has basically no results. Even if this were a top 15 list, I still couldn't have included Mewtwo. Okay, time for the top three. The number 3 best Psychic type Pokemon on my list is Lunala. Lunala has won the World Championships 1 time. It's also gotten second at the World Championship 1 time, and it's won 2 national level events. What you have to keep in mind about Lunala is that it's only ever been legal for 3 different years, so to get World's First and World's Second is very impressive. Lunala is a very bulky Pokemon who is kind of a jack of all trades. It can support its team with moves like Trick Room, Tailwind, and Wide Guard. It can do damage with Moongeist Beam. It can set up with Meteor Beam or Calm Mind, and it can heal itself with Moonlight. The main issue with Lunala is that you can only pick 4 moves when often you'd prefer to have like 10. Its ability is Shadow Shield, which is an amazing ability that halves all damage when it still has full HP. Combining this with how bulky Lunala is makes it virtually impossible to knock out in one hit if it still has full HP. I mentioned Meteor Beam a second ago, but Lunala actually won the World Championships when it didn't have access to this move, which is pretty surprising because Ghost and Psychic typing is not very good, and the year that Lunala won Worlds was a year where Incineroar was incredibly dominant. Lunala is a restricted Pokemon, which means that not only is it rarely legal, but when it is, you can only have 1 or 2 of them on your team. And using your restricted slot for a Pokemon that loses super hard to Incineroar and can't really do much back Seems a little bit risky, but it paid off, and Lunala won the World Championships despite Incineroar's dominance. Nowadays, Lunala has a much better matchup against Incineroar because, again, I got access to Meteor Beam, which is a 2-turn move that you can make 1 turn with Power Herb that powers up the user as a rock-type move and can KO most Incineroar in 1 hit, but clearly Lunala doesn't need it because it won Worlds without it. Now, I will say, despite Lunala's very impressive finishes, it was actually very bad the most recent time that it was legal, and that's in part because the most recent format, called Regulation G, only allowed 1 restricted Pokemon, whereas all prior restricted formats allowed 2. And I think the thing about Lunala is that it's really good as a
Shiny
restricted
Pokemon
Pokemon
are
that is
easily
like
the
not your
rarest thing you can
primary
find
one.
in
Like you
any
normally want at least 1 restricted Pokemon that's going to do
against the
crazy
gym
amounts of
leaders.
damage, like
Also,
Groudon
who
or
really wants
Kyogre
an
or
option
Zacian.
myself?
But Lunala
Zango
really
and head
excelled
out
at
to
kind
look
of
for
sitting
my
on the
stuff.
field,
Fully
being
torture
bulky,
myself by
doing
trying
good
to beat
damage over
Pokemon Black
time,
2
like being
using
hard to
only
remove,
shiny
which is less valuable when your opponent is hitting you with moves like Water Spout or Precipice Blades or some of the more powerful ones, like, you know, even Xerneas's moves, right? Something that I'm personally very curious about is how Lunala will perform when 2 restricted Pokemon are allowed in Scarlet and Violet. One of its main weaknesses is its typing, being quadruple weak to both Ghost and Dark, and with Terastallization, Lunala can get around this. Now, again, as a single restricted Pokemon, it wasn't good enough, but as a double restricted Pokemon, I think we could see more good stuff from Lunala. Until then, though, it's earning the number 3 slot on my list. The number 2 slot on my list is... I'm cheating a little bit. I'm putting 2 Pokemon at the number 2 slot because they have the same name. It's Calyrex Ice and Calyrex Shadow. Calyrex Shadow has won the World Championships, and Calyrex Ice got 2nd place 1 time. Keep in mind, these Pokemon have only been legal for 2 World Championships. Also, each Calyrex won the North American International Championships once. The reason I'm putting these 2 together is because it would feel really weird to split them up, at least to me personally, because they have so much in common, and because they have similar levels of results, even though it's not identical. Both Calyrex have a couple things in common. They're both Psychic type, and their ability is basically just a reskin of the same thing. This ability is called As One, and it not only prevents the opponent from eating any berries as long as Calyrex is on the field, but it also powers up Calyrex's highest attacking stat every single time it gets a KO. This can very quickly lead to games getting out of hand, because if Calyrex gets 1 KO, it's easier to get future KOs, etc, etc. They also each have a signature move that never misses, does huge damage, and hits both opponents. Glacial Lance and Astral Barrage are 2 of the most powerful moves ever made, and whereas normally moves this strong have some kind of real drawback, these moves just don't. Calyrex Shadow typically is used as a setup sweeper with the attack Nasty Plot, which doubles its special attack, and it has worse typing and worse bulk than Ice Rider, but it is much faster, which is a huge edge. Conversely, Ice Rider is way tankier, but it's also way slower, and it often relies on Trick Room to move first, which is okay because it can set it up for itself. Ice Rider has better coverage moves, whereas Shadow Rider suffers because the overlap between Psychic and Ghost is awkward. But Shadow Rider is the single fastest restricted Pokemon, which gives it an edge against almost every other restricted Pokemon just from the get-go. To me, these are the modern day Xerneases. The only reason that they don't win more events is because they are so good that they have such a big target on their backs. Shadow Rider in particular is a bit easier to counter than Ice Rider because any Dark type is immune to Psychic type attacks and resists Ghost, and is often able to KO Calyrex in a single hit back. There's also specific type combinations that give Shadow Rider trouble, like how Farigiraf is immune to Ghost and resists Psychic. That being said, it is really difficult to shut down these Pokemon completely, and even if you built your team with them in mind, you might still lose. Which just leaves the number 1 best Psychic type Pokemon of all time. It's not Terra Psychic Incineroar, it's actually Cresselia. Cresselia is the only Psychic type Pokemon to have won the World Championships 3 different times. It is the most dominant Pokemon of Black and White. It was extremely good during X and Y, and despite falling off in later years, it saw a resurgence in Scarlet and Violet. Cresselia was basically the bulkiest Pokemon that players used for many years, which is a problem because Cresselia has one of the best move pools of any Psychic type Pokemon. It can control the speed of the battle with Trick Room, Icy Wind, or Thunder Wave. It can boost its partner with Helping Hand. It can do damage itself with Ice Beam and Psychic and Psyshock. I've even won a tournament with Hidden Power Fire Cresselia, and there are so many other support moves it gets as well, like Safeguard and Swagger, like I mentioned with Metagross. Some players even ran more offensive items like Choice Specs or Expert Belt, taking advantage of the fact that it's naturally so bulky that you could train it very heavily in its offenses without worrying about keeping it alive. Cresselia enabled so many other Pokemon. In years where there weren't great Trick Room setters, Cresselia rose above and beyond to basically enable the entire strategy. It was especially dangerous because Cresselia worked so well in and out of Trick Room. Some players would use both Trick Room and Icy Wind to counter faster teams with Trick Room and middle speed teams with Icy Wind. It is worth noting that Cresselia was so good that it's one of the few legendary Pokemon that's received a nerf, with several of its stats being lowered going into Scarlet and Violet. That being said, Cresselia also received a buff in Legends Arceus, which carried over to Scarlet and Violet with its new signature signature move, Lunar Blessing, which not only healed itself and its partner by a quarter of their health, but also healed any of their status conditions. This allowed Cresselia to serve as a really hard counter to Amoonguss, who could otherwise put multiple Pokemon to sleep. Cresselia saw a decent bit of play when it was added to Scarlet and Violet, mostly when paired with Ursaluna. Ursaluna really wants to be in Trick Room, and it really wants to use Earthquake as well. Cresselia could set Trick Room and was immune to Earthquake, but that wasn't the only advantage. Lunar Blessing was great with Ursaluna because Ursaluna has to burn itself with the Flame Orb item in order to activate its full power. Burn doing damage over time could really quickly wear down Ursaluna, but Lunar Blessing would not only cure the burn for the turn, but also give Ursaluna some recovery. Flame Orb as an item activates multiple times, and so even though you would cure the burn, you would still end up burned at the end of the turn, basically allowing Ursaluna to skip taking damage for the turn, effectively increasing the healing by another 6%. The more the generations go on and the more powerful the Pokemon get, I suspect the more trouble Cresselia will have keeping up, especially now that it has been nerfed, but it had such a dominant run, and it's one of the only Pokemon to win the World Championships 3 times, whereas no Pokemon has won the World Championships unless your opponent overrode it somehow. And Garchomp has good enough natural bulk that it often took 2 or 3 different hits to get rid of it, and every time you attacked Garchomp, you had a chance to miss. Given that Garchomp is so strong and so fast and so good at putting out damage, missing 2 or oftentimes even 1 move against it could cause you to fall too far behind to recover. Nowadays though, Garchomp tends to use the Rough Skin ability more often because it often works as a standalone Pokemon rather than one paired with Tyranitar. Rough Skin isn't as insane as Sandveil is, but it is more consistent because it always activates when the effect triggers rather than Sandveil, which only activates, 20% of the time. And also it's really good at breaking focus sashes, and if you don't have sand on your team, then you don't really want Sandveil anyway. The main thing that makes Garchomp so strong is how fast it is and how strong it is. It definitely doesn't have the same stats as some of the, new power crept Pokemon, but it is really good and really consistent, and it's faster and stronger than a lot of Pokemon that tend to be used within a format. The real number you want to be above often is base 100. That's like where a lot of Pokemon tend to fall in most formats prior to Scarlet and Violet, like back in the day. And with this speed stack, Garchomp was great at just outputting consistent damage. Dragon also has good synergy with ground offensively, because for a while the only type that resisted dragon type moves was steel, and steel type Pokemon are weak to ground. Now we have fairy type Pokemon who are immune to dragon moves, but ground is at least still neutral against them, so it's not awful. Garchomp's main weakness is its quadruple weakness to ice, and the fact that it has stats that were really broken for a 4th gen Pokemon, not a 9th gen Pokemon, but overall it's able to work around these weaknesses somewhat well. It is a Pokemon that has struggled a lot in recent years. Power creep has not been kind to Garchomp, and it has trouble keeping up with some of the most broken Pokemon that they're releasing nowadays. That being said, Garchomp just had a major resurgence because in the rule set following last year's World Championships, called Regulation H, all legendary Pokemon were banned, and all Paradox Pokemon to boot. With many of its main threats removed, Garchomp had an incredible string of performances, winning multiple regionals, getting second at multiple regionals, and being overall one of the staples of the format. It was able to take advantage of one of the newer tools added to the games, the Clear Amulet, which prevented its attack stat from being lowered, primarily via Intimidate. I do think that power creep has not been kind to Garchomp, and when all of the Pokemon are available, it's a Pokemon that probably can't keep up, which is part of the reason why it's not higher up on this list. The Pokemon above it absolutely can still keep up, but I do think that in formats where the power level is lower, we'll definitely be seeing more of Garchomp. Okay, top 2, and they're both legendary Pokemon. My guess is that some of you probably expect that the number 2 Pokemon, Landorus, was going to be the number 1, but it's not. Just like Ursaluna, Landorus has 2 forms, and I'll talk about both of them here. Actually, also similar to Ursaluna, they both share typing, and one is a physical attacker, one is a special attacker. The most infamous one, of course, is Landorus Therian, who for a while was thought to be the best Pokemon of all time. In addition to winning Worlds twice, Landorus Therian also got second at Worlds twice, and has won 6 national and international championships. Landorus Therian has a ridiculously high attack stat, in addition to good natural bulk and a respectable speed tier. It feels even bulkier than it actually is because it gets access to Intimidate, which again is one of the most versatile and generally useful abilities in the entire competitive game.
Yeah, I've been
it's also
watching
one of the best Intimidate users
Twitch
because of its stupidly deep move pool, which I really don't understand. Landorus gets great coverage moves like Superpower and Knockoff, but it also gets U-Turn, which causes it to not only do damage, but also switch out. U-Turn is an incredible staple of its move pool because it allows Landorus to switch out while also doing damage and scouting for what the opponent wants to do, and this allows it to get off the field while still doing damage, which then in turn allows it to reactivate Intimidate later on in the battle. U-Turn's also decent as a coverage move because although Bug isn't a very strong offensive type, one of the main Pokemon that countered Landorus for a while, or was supposed to counter Landorus, was Cresselia, who's a super tanky Pokemon that's immune to ground type moves and can learn ice type moves, which Landorus is weak to. That being said, Landorus could do good chip damage to Cresselia with U-turn while also keeping itself safe thanks to its higher speed stat, making it much harder to pin the Tiger down. Ground and Flying also have really good offensive synergy together, since ground type Pokemon are unable to hit grass and bug type Pokemon for neutral damage, both of which are weak to Flying, and Flying's not very effective against Steel, Rock, and Electric type Pokemon, all of whom are weak to ground. Of course, this is less of a big deal because Landorus doesn't learn really any good Flying type attacks, but that's not so much of an issue because it's able to use Flying type moves with Z-Max and then Dynamax and now Terrestrialization. Landorus Incarnate was certainly never as dominant as Landorus Therian, but it was still very powerful, and it actually got second at the World Championships last year. It also has 2 national wins and a handful of regional wins. Landorus Incarnate, I think, is the best ground type special attacker of all time. This is because, similar to Nidoking, it gets the ability Sheer Force. With Sheer Force, Life Orb, and its much higher special attack stat, Landorus Incarnate can output tons of ground type damage that can't be slowed down by Intimidate. It was certainly never as dominant as Landorus Therian, but it was still a good Pokemon in its own right, and it actually had a ton of good performances last year alone. I actually think that last year it probably outperformed Landorus Therian on the whole. Landorus and Landorus are certainly 2 of the best ground type Pokemon of all time. But the best ground type Pokemon of all time is Groudon. Groudon is a 2-time world champion, placed second at Worlds twice, and has 8 national and international wins. He's the Dawn. But what you have to understand about Groudon is that although it has pretty much as good or better results as any other Pokemon on this list, it's only legal for a fraction of the time. Groudon is a restricted Pokemon, and restricted Pokemon are only legal during very specific rule sets. I started playing competitively in 2011. The first year that Groudon was legal after I started playing was 2016. For contrast, Landorus was legal every single one of those years that Groudon wasn't, and Groudon still has better results. Now, Groudon also technically has 2 forms. It has its regular form and its primal form, which was similar to Mega Evolution but more broken, if you can believe that. Primal Groudon was insane. It gained the fire typing, which caused it to only have 2 weaknesses to ground and a quadruple weakness to water, but its ability, Desolate Land, turned the sunlight to Primordial Sunlight, which caused all water moves to evaporate and do 0 damage. So effectively, if the Primordial Sun was up, Primal Groudon only had 1 weakness. Primal Groudon has some of the best stats of any restricted Pokemon ever. It is ridiculously tanky, it hits super hard, and it even has the option of being a special attacker because it has a respectable special attack stat. It has a signature move called Precipice Blades, which is kind of Earthquake for gamblers. It's higher risk, higher reward. It can miss unlike Earthquake, but it's much stronger and it doesn't hit your partner. Primal Groudon also has ridiculous synergy with Xerneas, who at the time was the single most threatening restricted Pokemon. As a fairy type attacker, Xerneas' moves were only resisted by fire, poison, and steel type Pokemon, all of whom are weak to Groudon. Every single one of them. Steel's actually weak to both of Primal Groudon's types. Primal Groudon and Xerneas were the most threatening restricted duo in all of the years that they were legal, and they won the majority of tournaments, by far the most out of any restricted pairing. But regular Groudon is no slouch. It won the World Championships in 2010 and got second at the World Championships in 2022 as well. Groudon was probably the second best restricted Pokemon behind Zacian during Sword and Shield because it not only worked as a Dynamax attacker, becoming incredibly tanky, resetting its own weather if it went down with fire moves, and making its team more specially bulky with Max Quake, but it also enabled Gigantamax Charizard, who was probably the most threatening Dynamax attacker. Gigantamax Charizard was able to do unholy amounts of damage, often picking up one-hit KOs even on Dynamax Pokemon, but it was only able to do this if the strong sunlight was up. The combination of regular Groudon and Gigantamax Charizard dominated for most of Sword and Shield during the year that it was legal, and it only just barely didn't win the World Championships. Now, it is worth noting that Groudon was legal during Scarlet and Violet's first restricted format, where you were only allowed to use one restricted Pokemon, and it didn't really have many good results. It was used as like a niche option here and there, and it certainly was threatening, like it was a Pokemon that players were aware of, but it was not in the top 7 best restricted Pokemon. I think this is in part due to power creep. I think this is in part due to the fact that it doesn't currently have access to its primal form, and I think it's because there's another restricted Pokemon that can set the sun up, which is much faster than Groudon. That being said, I would never count Groudon out, and I'm sure that it
Hooray.
This fucking guy. Mm. Gonna figure out how to set up my fucking Shazam account if there is one for artists.